We begin today the Gemara on Daf Kuf Nun Gimel Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom of the Amud. Want to show them over there? Kuf Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Okay, so this is going back to what it said in the Mishnah, when you had a star that is written with, there's a kinyan here, but in the star itself, it's not clear what kind of a star this was. Was this a gift of a dying person, a shchiv mirah, or is this a gift of a person that was healthy? Now, it's a big nafkamina. If he was a dying person, so now if he recovered, he wants to retract from the whole gift. But if it was a gift of a healthy person, you can't retract from that. You gave it as a gift. That's the argument here regarding this star. Okay, so in the Mishnah there was a machlokes. Rav Meir says that the giver, he's going to have to prove that he was a shchiv mirah. Otherwise, we're going to assume that he was a healthy person. The Chachamim say no. The giver is the one that's occupying the properties now. So he has the cheskas moment, it's in his possession. So the recipient is going to have to prove that he was a healthy person and then use the star he has to take these properties away from the giver. That's the machlokes in the Mishnah. Okay, so the Gemara is going to bring here a long discussion about these two opinions. Zok the Gemara, the first question on this is, Raya b'mai. When it says in the Mishnah that, Kuf Nun, you got it? Kuf Nun. When it says in the Mishnah that he brings a raya, so Gemara is asking on both opinions, whether according to the Rabbanan, whether according to Rav Meir, if the giver has to bring a raya or the recipient has to bring a raya, what kind of raya are we talking about over here? So the Gemara says, Rav Huna says, raya be'edim, that both according to Rav Meir and the Rabbanan, the raya that we're talking about has to be with witnesses. You need to have witnesses that were present when they signed the shtar, and they can tell us whether the person was a shchiv mirah, whether he was a dying person or a healthy person. And the Gemara will soon explain this better. Rav Chizde v'Rabbi bar Rav Huna Amri, Rav Chizde and Rabbi bar Rav Huna both say, no, raya b'kiyam ashtar. The raya that we're talking about over here is that, at least the raya that the Chachamim say, that the recipient has to prove, it would just be enough that he could verify that the shtar that he has, the document that he has, is a valid shtar, and that's enough. He'll be able to be mitzi. Okay, now the Gemara explains. What is this machlokes over here? Rav Huna explained our Mishnah, Raya be'edim, that the Raya, that both the Chachamim and Rav Meir are talking about, is that you have to bring edim, whether this person was healthy or not. Kamiflagi, the argument here in the Mishnah is beplukte the Rab Yaakov and Rab Nassan. It's the same argument between Rab Yaakov and Rab Nassan that was brought on the Amud before, and the Gemara gives a siman for this to understand who holds like who. And the siman is maniach, which means that Rab Meir, the mem, he holds like Rab Nassan, and the yud, which is Rab Yaakov, that goes with the Chachamim. Okay, so what was the machlokes that the Gemara brought before? So the Gemara before brought the machlokes in a case where the person today is healthy. That's what our Mishnah is talking about. Today the person is healthy, and that he's claiming that when he wrote the shtar, then he was a shchiv mirah. Okay, so according to Rab Nassan, he says he's going to have to prove that he was a shchiv mirah. Then we look at hashta, we look at who he is now. Since we see today he's healthy, so we're going to assume that he was healthy then when he wrote the shtar as well. And therefore, the recipient that wants to take away the cheskas moment, he's taking away the properties from the giver, he's able to take it away. Why? Because he has a valid shtar, and we see this person today is healthy. So that chazaka of now is enough to allow him to take it away. That's the opinion of Rab Nassan, and that's the opinion of Rab Meir. But the Chachamim follow what Rab Yaakov says. Rab Yaakov says, no. The giver is the one that's possessing the money. If he's possessing the money and you want to take away from him, it's not enough to rely on what we see today, that he's healthy, and to assume that he was healthy when he wrote the shtar. You're going to have to bring edim in order to be mitzi the money. You have to bring edim that he was not a shchiv mirah when he wrote the shtar. Otherwise, it's still possible that then when he wrote the shtar, he was a shchiv mirah. So in other words, he says that cheskas mamin is stronger. The fact that the giver is possessing the money, that's very strong. You can't take it away from him without bringing clear edim that know that he was healthy when he wrote the shtar. That's the machlokes of Rab Yaakov and Rab Nassan. The same machlokes here in our Mishnah between Rab Meir and the Chachamim. So Rab Meir, the Gemara here spells it out. Rab Meir Rab Nassan, Rab Meir holds like Rab Nassan, and Rabbanan Rab Yaakov, and Rabbanan like Rab Yaakov, as I just explained it. Now, what's the other way of understanding our Mishnah? Rav Chizda v'Rabbi bar Rav Huna Amri, Rav Chizda and Rabbi bar Rav Huna say that no, Raya b'kiyam ashtar kamiflagi. What they're arguing over here about is regarding being mekayim the shtar. Now, when it says here in the Gemara kiyam ashtar, it's focusing mainly on this kiyam ashtar is regarding the recipient. In order for the recipient to be able to be mitzi these properties from the giver, So when it says in the Mishnah that Chachamim say that he has to bring a raya to be maitzi, what would be that raya? He doesn't have to bring witnesses that were present and were there and that could say that he was healthy when he wrote the shtar. It's going to be enough just the fact that he verifies that this document is a valid document. That's it. Once you validate that it's a good document, with that it would be enough to be maitzi the shtar. Okay, so now the Gemara here is going to explain the machlokes, but before we see the words of the Gemara inside, so as the Rashbam here and the Rishonim explain, any document, a shtar, min ha-Torah, it's totally kosher. You see the witnesses that signed it, and just the signatures itself, we rely on these signatures as being valid signatures. There's no concern that maybe there was a forgery or maybe there was something else that went wrong with the shtar. We rely on the shtar as is, that it's 100% valid. However, Chachamim instituted that you can't use a shtar to collect with it unless if there's going to be a challenge to this shtar. If the other party is going to claim that the shtar is false, you're not going to be able to use the shtar unless you validate the shtar. You're going to have to verify the authenticity of these signatures. You're going to have to bring the Eidim themselves to sign the shtar, or there's a couple of different ways how you can validate the actual signatures of the shtar. Until then, you won't be able to collect with the shtar. So what's basically going on over here in our Mishnah? Here in our Mishnah, the giver is the one that's admitting that, yep, the shtar is valid, it's not a forgery. I wrote the shtar, I gave it as a gift. So he's admitting it. So now, usually when you validate a shtar, how do you validate the shtar? By the Eidim that validate the shtar, or you find a proper proof to validate their signatures. What's unique in our case in the Mishnah is there was no validation that was done for this shtar from a third party, from an outside source. The validation is coming from who? From the giver himself. He's the one that's admitting and saying that this shtar is kosher. So now the question is, in such a case, when it's the one that the giver himself that's validating the shtar, does he now have the ability to add a caveat to that? He can come and say, look, I'm telling you that it's true, I wrote this shtar, but if it's me that's validating it, you have no other source, then I'm telling you what the story with the shtar is. It's a valid shtar, but I wrote it when I was a shchiv mirah, and therefore now that I'm healthy, I want to retract from this. That's the question. If he himself is the one that's validating the shtar, could he now come and say that it's not applicable anymore because it's been given only when I was a shchiv mirah? So here, the Gemara explains as follows. Let's see in the words of the Gemara. So now, what are they arguing about? If a person admits, you have no other source that the shtar is kosher. It's just he himself that's admitting that this is a kosher shtar, whether tzarech l'kaimai, is there a point to get an additional validation besides him, to get other Eidim to come and validate it? Is there any point in getting another validation over here for the shtar or not? The Rav Meir says, once you admitted, the one that gives or the one that wrote the shtar, he admits that this shtar is a kosher shtar, there's no point in having any additional validation, because now that you admitted that this shtar is kosher, it's 100% an authentic kosher shtar, and you actually do not have the ability to passel the shtar in any way. You have no ability to come and say, oh, but the shtar is not usable. Why? Because it was written when I was a shchiv mirah. If we see a kosher shtar in front of us, you don't have the ability to come and tell us any story about the shtar. Just like if there would be Eidim here. If Eidim would come and validate a shtar, can you come along and say now a story about the shtar that it was a shchiv mirah when I wrote it? You can't come and say such a thing, because Eidim validated the shtar as is, and in the shtar it doesn't say anything about the fact that you were a shchiv mirah. So you can't come and say a story about the shtar. Yeah. Rab Meir says, even if it's you yourself that validated the shtar, you still can't come and add any details and say anything about what happened to the shtar.
Yes, Miko.
One second. V'Rabbanan Savri, however, the Rabbanan's opinion is that even if it's the person that gave the shtar, he's the one that's made that the shtar is good, but nevertheless, it's only he that validated it. We didn't have an outside source that validated the shtar. You're still going to need an outside source to validate the shtar if you're going to want to prevent him from now coming and saying, this shtar that I just said is valid, I'm telling you about this shtar, so-and-so. I'm telling you that this shtar was written when I was a shchiv mirah. So because he still has the ability to say that about the shtar. Now what's the basis of this? So this is like you were just saying, the concept of migu, or the way that Rashbam uses another expression, he uses the expression of migu as well, but the expression of apesha osar, hu apesha iter. If I'm the one that's validating the shtar, you have no other source of validation for this, so then you're listening to my mouth, what I'm saying. So I'm telling you the condition of how the shtar was written. It was written when I was a shchiv mirah. You can't take half of what I'm saying. You have to take everything that I'm saying. I'm telling you that the star is kosher. It's true. It's not a forgery, but it was written in a condition of me being a shchivmira. That's the basis of what the Chachamim say, that moide b'shtar shekosvay tzarech l'kaimai. That you can't. He's the one that is validating the star, so he can say what the condition is. So in order for the recipient to want to use this star, he's going to have to bring a independent source to validate the star, and that takes away your ability now to come and say what you want about the star. However, Rab Meir, though, disagrees, doesn't hold of this migu, doesn't hold of this pesha asar, because Rab Meir holds, going back to the point that I said at the beginning, that every star really minatayra is kosher. It's only the chachamim that it require to bring a validation, but minatayra, the star is 100% kosher. So therefore, you can't come when a star is presented here, you can't come and say, that the star can't be used because of this and this reason. Minatayra, the star is kosher, there's no migu or pesha asa that applies to it, because it's not really you that's validating it. Minatayra, the star is already kosher. Okay, so that's the point of the machlokes here in the Mishnah. When you have a star, the Chachamim say that you must validate the star. You must bring Eidim to validate the star, and then you can collect with it. Rab Meir holds, no, you don't need Eidim to come and validate the star. You were Maida that you wrote the star, so that's it. You don't have to validate it. You being Maida in itself is the best validation. We don't trust you now to say any conditions or details to passel this star. That's the pshat in our Mishnah. So it's all revolving around whether you have to be Mekayim and Shtar independently after he was Maida in it or not. Now the Gemara asks on this pshat here, if this is what they're arguing about, but the same achlekes already was taught between Rab Meir and the Chachamim in another case. The Tanya, as we learned in the Braise, and here this Braise is actually in connection to a Mishnah in Ksubis, where it also speaks about a Shtar, where you have a loive, a borrower that's admitting that, I borrowed the money and the star is valid. And then the Eidim over there, and now this is not a star that was independently verified. It's only accepted as a valid star because it's the borrower himself that's admitting that the star was written. But then the Eidim that come and say about the star, that this star, which is a valid star, however, there's a problem with the star. Whether because when it was written, we were forced to sign it, or whether we were katana when we signed it, they come and passel the shtar. They come and say that there's something, even though the shtar is not a forgery, but they come and now they passel the shtar. So now, in the Mishnah here, it says that the same machlokes applies in this case, the Tanya or the Braise. There's a Mishnah there, and then the Braise, it says that Ein Aman Ala Paisloi Divrei Rab Meir. Rab Meir says that once the loive admitted that the shtar is valid and it's not a forgery, so now the Eidim cannot come along and say, it's a valid shtar, but we're katanim, anusim, something else happened, and therefore the shtar is possible. Once the shtar is validated, so then the shtar is like Eidim that are speaking to us and telling us that what it says in the shtar is true, and now these Eidim themselves, they cannot come and invalidate the shtar, because the Lev already admitted that it's already a verified shtar. However, the Chachamim say, Nemonim, that these Eidim are believed to come and say that they were katanim or they were anusim, and therefore the shtar is possible. Why? Because what was the source of the validation of the shtar? Only the loive. No, it's only the loive that was made that the shtar over here is kosher. So because it's only the loive that was made that the shtar is kosher, it's not a proper validation. So therefore now, what happens if the Eidim come and say that this shtar is invalid because we were katanim and anusim? They're going to be believed. Why? Because so again, it's the same exact machlokes. When you have a loive that's made that the shtar is a valid shtar, is that considered to be a proper full kiyum? Now the shtar is 100% valid, and we can't challenge the authenticity or the use of the shtar, or no? Even after the loiv is mekayim the shtar, you're still able to challenge the use of the shtar, that maybe something went wrong with the shtar. So the Gemara explains, even though they argued about this over there, but tzricha. I have to say the machlokes over here between Rab Meir and the Chachamim again, because it's not exactly the same case. Because if we would only say that there's an argument over there in that case, then I would say Bahi Kamri Rabbanon. It's only there that the Chachamim say that if the loive admitted, then the authenticity of the shtar could still be challenged. And the reason is because who's the one that's now challenging the shtar? It's the Eidim now that are challenging it. Mishum da'alimi Eidim umari shtara. It's the Eidim themselves that signed the shtar that are also saying that the shtar is good, but the Eidim are now coming and saying, this shtar that we signed it when we were children, katanim or anusim. So, but it's Eidim that are invalidating the shtar. Eidim have a very strong koyach. So maybe because the Eidim are invalidating it, that's why the Chachamim say they're believed to do so.
The Shriv Mina is getting his way.
One second. In that Gemara, we're not talking about the Shchivmira. Over there, in that Gemara, it's talking about a loan. We're going to get back to the Shchivmira in a second. In that Gemara, it's talking about a loan. And the question is whether it's a good loan or not. Could we trust this shtar or not? And in that case, it's the Eidim themselves that are coming and saying that you can't collect with the shtar because when it was written, we were ketanim and therefore our signatures are invalid, or we were forced to sign it and even though it's not a forgery, but there was no money borrowed here, we were just forced to sign it. So the reason why Rei Chacham is saying that you can passel this shtar when there's no independent source to verify it is because it's the Eidim themselves that are coming and invalidating it. Eidim have a stronger kayach. Aval hacha hu de lav kol kemine. But over here, I would say that it's this person himself, the giver of the shtar himself, that he wants to invalidate the use of the shtar. He himself wants to come and say that I was a shchivmira when it was written. Who says he has the power to change and challenge the authenticity of the shtar, even according to the Chachamim? So therefore, I'd have to say that even the Chachamim agree over here as well, and say their opinion that, or not agree, the Chachamim say their opinion as well here, that this person can come and challenge the kashrus of the shtar, because there's no independent source to validate it. It all comes from him. So therefore, I would think that what Chachamim said there should not apply here. And I would also say the same thing, the opposite. If we would only say our case, when it's just the giver himself that's challenging the use of the shtar, I would say that it's only over here that Rav Meir says that we don't trust him himself to come and invalidate the shtar. But in that case in Ksubis, that's the Braisa, the Gemara quoted from the Gemara in Ksubis, over there it's a case where it's Eidim that are invalidating it. Maybe I would say that when Eidim are much stronger, maybe they would agree that the Eidim could invalidate the shtar. So therefore it has to say both cases. To tell me that the machlekes regarding a shtar that was validated only by the giver or the loive, the one that wrote the shtar, he validated, but there was no independent source to validate it. The machlekes applies in both cases, whether it's he himself that now wants to invalidate it, or the eidim of the shtar themselves want to invalidate it. The same machlekes applies in both cases, whether they're able to do so. Rabba also said regarding the pshat of our Mishnah, when it says that you have to bring a raya, what is raya? Raya be'edim. That, like the first opinion here, like what Rav Huna said, that you have to bring a raya with edim. The argument here is not about validating the shtar, but the raya we're talking about is with edim. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye said to Rabba, my timer. What's your reasoning? Why are you saying over here that in such a case, you have to bring a raya with edim, and it's not clear to us what the shtar, what situation the shtar was written in. In other words, the recipients, they have a shtar. Why shouldn't they be able to collect with the shtar itself? Why do they have to bring a raya with edim that this person was healthy when he wrote the shtar? Now, if you're going to say the reason is that midekuluk sivbu, because usually a regular shtar that's written by a healthy person, so it's clarified in the shtar, and it says that the shtar was written when this person was healthy and he was able to walk on his feet in the marketplace. So, but in this shtar, it doesn't clarify that he was healthy. So that itself would tell you that when he wrote the shtar, he was not healthy, and therefore, even though they're holding the shtar, but it doesn't say in the shtar that he was healthy. So they were going to have to prove this. They're going to have to bring eidim for this. That's one way of understanding this. But the Gemara says Adarabe. But if that's the issue, because you're looking into what it says in the shtar, say the opposite. Midekuluk sivbu, usually by a shtar that's written by a dying person, that itself is also clarified in the shtar. It says usually kat kotzer, when he was ill, v'rami barasen, he was lying in his bed, and v'holek sivba. In this shtar, it doesn't say that he was ill and lying in his bed. So shmami no bariyabe. So from this, I see that this person was probably healthy. Why didn't it specify that in the shtar? So now what's the point here? You have a shtar here that is a line. There's usually something that's written in a shtar of a healthy person. Usually something that's written in a shtar of a dying person. It's not written either of this. It's not clarified in the shtar itself. So therefore, in such a case, what do I say? That I leave the money in the possession of the giver. And therefore, this is what the Chachamim are saying, that it's not going to be enough to just validate the shtar, because there's a line missing in the shtar. There's something integral missing here. So you're going to have to bring Eidim to fill that in for us, to fill in that information for us and tell us that this person was healthy when he wrote the shtar. That's the reason why, according to Rabbi, it's not just enough to validate the shtar itself. Usually you can just validate the shtar itself, but here, and another detail here that Rashbam points out, that even according to this pshat, that we say that it's just enough to validate the shtar, the person is healthy today. So you can just follow the status of right now today, this person is healthy. But according to Rabbe, and according to what the Gemara brought before Rav Huna as well, that's not enough, because the reason is we see that there's a line missing in the star. So we're going to have Eidim for this.
Why does it say in the possession of the giver?
Cheskas Mammon, as the Gemara says. He's the one that's currently possessing those properties. Again?
He's buried. He's healthy.
Now, how do we know though? That's the thing. Because the star is missing that line. So today he's body, but when he wrote the star, that we don't know. And we're looking into the star itself, and we're expecting to find that line that would tell us, and it's not there. So there's something that's unusual, there's something that's missing in the line of the star. So therefore we leave it by the giver. He's the one that's possessing it now until Adam will come and fill that in that information for us.
The star always says that it's buried. He's buried.
That's the point there. Yeah, usually it would say.
Okay.
And here it's not saying this. Now says the Gemara Beplukta the Rabbi Yechanan, the same argument we just brought before here regarding the Pshat of the Mishnah. So Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish argued about this as well. Rabbi Yechanan says, what's the Pshat in our Mishnah? Raya be'edim. It's not enough just that the recipient should validate the star, but he's going to have to bring edim as well to validate, not just validate, but to prove that the giver was healthy when he gave it. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, no, Raya be'kiyum ashtar. It's just enough to validate the star. Once you validate the star, it's good enough. We're not going to be chayshish that maybe he was a shchiv mera when he gave it. That's enough just to validate the star. So the same argument that we had before. Okay, so the Gemara now asks from a story. Eisvei Rav Yechanan Rav Shimon ben Lakish. Rav Yechanan, sorry. Rav Yechanan asked Reish Lakish from the following brisa. So it says, Maise b'bnei Barak. There was a story in the city of Bnei Barak. With an individual, Shomacha b'nichsei aviv. So after the father died and there was the inheritance, he went and he sold part of the properties to somebody. And now this one of these children that sold it, now he passed away. Now what happened now? Ubo b'nei mishpacha. Now other family members came, ve'iriru loymar, and they challenged this whole sale of this one brother or this one person that sold, and they said, Katanoya b'shas misa. That this child he sold, his sale is not valid because he died as a child. He wasn't even bar mitzvah yet. So the whole sale is invalid. So here we have a similar case to what we're talking about until here. Why? Because the case here is that the buyers had a star that they bought this property. And there's no argument that the star was written, it's a valid star, it's not a forgery. But what are they saying? It's a valid star, but still we're going to passel this star. Why? Because he was a cotton when he sold the properties. So what happens in such a case? Now, so they came and asked Rabbi Akiva about this. The way the Gemara understands the story right now is that these properties were still in the possession of the family, and the buyers they want to take it, and so the family is not letting them take it. The family is saying the one that sold it was the child when he sold it. So the buyers now came to Rabbi Akiva and they said to him, you know what? Mahu, let's do as follows. Let's take a look at the body and see is he an adult or not. There's simonim in the body itself. The shtei side is here, as you can see whether he's a gadol or not. So Rabbi Akiva says to them, you can't disgrace a body to go and check because of a money matter. You can't go and do such a thing. And besides that, whatever signs there could be in the physical body itself to go and check to see, but after a person dies, that could change. You can't necessarily determine based on what you see. And Taisus Avir points out exactly why, that you can't see what the story is after the person dies. So you can't go and check into this. That's what it says in the Braisa. Okay, so now what's the question of Rabbi Yechanan? Says Rabbi Yechanan, now Bishloim Elididi, according to my opinion, so we can make sense out of the story. Because Damina, I said, Raye Be'edim, that in a case where you have a star, and then there's a challenge regarding the star, not that the star is not authentic, it's a real star, it's not a forgery. But there's a question of what the condition was when the star was written. Just like before we were discussing, that maybe when the star was written, the giver was a shchiv mera. So over here as well, there's a challenge to the star because maybe the seller, the child, he was really just a cotton and he couldn't sell it at all. So Rabbi Yechanan says, what's my opinion? In such a case, you're going to have to bring Eidim. You need witnesses that were there to know whether he was a child or not. So therefore, what happened over here in the story? Why were the buyers saying that they want to go and check the body of this dead person? Because because probably what happened over here is that he said to the buyers, go and bring Eidim. that the seller was an adult, was a gadol, and he was able to sell it to you. And they couldn't find Eidim. The cost of Amrule. And so therefore, the buyer said, you know what, we can't bring Eidim, but Ma'ala Baitkai. Let's inspect and see the condition of the body to know if he was a gadol or not. That's why they wanted to do such an extreme thing. But Rabbi Yochanan asks Rish Lakish, but according to your opinion, the Amrit, you said, Raye Bekiyam Ashtar. The only thing that has to be done is validate the shtar, and once the shtar is validated, so then there's nothing additional that has to be done over here. Once you validated the shtar, you rely on the shtar, and we're not going to be chayshish, just like in the story before, we're not chayshish that he was a shchiv mirah. Over here as well, we're not going to be chayshish that he was a cotton. So lama luhula baitkai. So then why should you have to go and inspect the body to see l'kai mishtarayu? Just validate the shtar, v'leik mibenichsi, and let the buyers go and take their properties from the family. Okay, so now Tosfos over here points out that there's an additional svara the Gemara doesn't mention, because in the case that we were discussing before regarding our Mishnah, where the question is, maybe when he wrote the shtar he was a shchiv mirah, there's a certain maila, there's a certain reason why we don't believe that today, because today we see he's healthy. Well, the guy's alive today. In our case, we see the person is healthy. So there's a chazaka hashta we see today. Over here, we're talking about this child, or this, we don't know, maybe he was a child, maybe not, but today he died. So we can't base anything on what we see in front of us today. So how's the Gemara comparing? So Tosfos says, even though in our case we don't see anything today because he's dead, but nevertheless there's another concept which the Gemara is going to bring at the end of this whole inyan, that usually there's a chazakah, that a shtar that's written and signed, Eidim are not going to sign a shtar that the child writes. Why would they sign a shtar that they see it's only a child that writes this? They know that this is not serious. If Eidim sign it, there's an assumption that this person was not a cotton, was a gadol. So therefore, over here as well, we could say, once you see a shtar and it's validated that we know it's not a forgery, according to Reish Lakish that says that validating a shtar is good enough, so then why are they saying that we should check the body over here to see if he was a gadol or not? Okay, so Reish Lakish answers, you got the story wrong. The case was actually different. Mi savres, do you think that the story here was that nichsi b'cheskes b'nei mishpacha kaimi, that these properties were still in the possession of the family, and it's now the buyers that are trying to take it away from them? Because and now the buyers are coming, and they're challenging, and then they're saying, give it to us. No, the story is the opposite. Nichsi b'cheskes l'kuchas kaimi. The story over here is that the buyers already took these properties. They presented a shtar, and because once they presented a shtar, they took the properties, they took possession over it. And now it's the family members that are coming to the buyers and saying, give it back to us. They're saying that this was a mistake because the seller was a cotton. That's the story that happened over here. So in such a case, you can't apply this point over here that you should validate the shtar. If it was the recipient that was trying to take it away, then Rabbi Yochanan could argue to Reish Lakish, according to you, just validate the shtar. But if it's the other way around, it's the family members that are trying to claim that this whole sale is null and void because the child was a cotton. To prove that, there's no point in validating the shtar. Adarabah, if you validate the shtar, that would just prove that the sale is good. Over here, they're trying to prove that it was still a cotton. So it was the family members that were saying, let's go and see, let's check the body to see if he was a cotton or not. That's the story here. Now the Gemara says, Hachanami Mistavre, if you look at the story of the Braisa, it's logical to say that the ones that were arguing here to take it back are the family members, because what did Rabbi Akiva say to them? You can't disgrace the body to check if it was a cotton or not. And what is this story here? V'ishtaku. And they were quiet. They accepted what Rabbi Akiva said, that we can't disgrace the body. Now, if you're going to say that the case over here is that it's actually the family members of this person that died, they're the ones that are challenging, and it's them that Rabbi Akiva said you can't disgrace the body. So we can understand why they accepted that and they were quiet, because it's their own family member. They don't want to do anything that will be not coveting for the body. But if you're going to say that it's buyers that were challenging and saying and suggesting, let's check the condition of the body to see what's going on, amai shaski. Why, after Rabbi Akiva told them that we're not going to inspect the body, why were they quiet about this? They should tell Rabbi Akiva, Anan Zuzi Avinale. We paid top dollar for this property here. L'navel. So it's like not a nice thing. What should we do? But this matter has to be determined. We have to know if we deserve to get this properties or not. So let the body be disgraced in order to find out the truth. If it's family members, we could understand why they would be ready to forgive on these properties, on the money here, because of the covet of their own family member. But if it's just a buyer, so then why wouldn't they press the matter further? So therefore it's mistaver that it was a family member, and the lekuchos already have the properties and they wanted to take it back. But the Gemara says in this that if it's just this proof that you brought here, lo yeria. This it's not necessarily a proof. In other words, the answer of Rish Lakish is a good answer, but the proof that we just brought is not necessarily true, because when you look into what Rabbi Akiva said, you actually see Rabbi Akiva said two things. Hachi ka'amalu. This is what he was telling them. Chade, number one, he was saying, Iyatam l'sham l'navlai. You should not disgrace the body just because of your money issue. And furthermore, you're going to argue and say, Zuzi Shakel, that he took money from us. So Linavel, now that he took money from us, and now we're stuck over here, we can't get the properties that we want, too bad. We're going to have to disgrace the body to see the story, Linavel. So here, Rabbi Akiva said a second point, that there's no point in checking the body. Why? Because the signs that you want to see in the body, if he was an adult or a child, that could change after he passes away, so there's no point in looking at the body. And some, I think most Rishonim over here say that what must have happened over here, that this child passed away right after, or this person passed away right after the sale, and therefore it's immediately after. So the suggestion was to check it, and you'll be able to see because it was right after. But even then, even right after, you said that you can't check the body after the person passed away. So the Gemara Vaita Toshama, or others are not guided here Toshama. The Gemara here is going to bring a discussion between Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yechanan, and based on what it says here, it's going to switch everything we had before. Right before the Gemara brought Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yechanan, that Rabbi Yechanan is the one that said that you have to have Eidim. It's not enough just to verify a shtar. If there's still a concern that he may have been a shchiv mirah, you're going to have Eidim for this. And Rish Lakish is the one that says that you rely just on the shtar, and you learned that the pshat in our Mishnah, machlokes between Rav Meir and the Chachamim is whether when this giver admitted that the shtar was written, do you have to have a further validation or not? That was the way the Gemara explained it till now, but now here the Gemara is going to bring another discussion between Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yechanan that will cause us to switch their opinions, as we'll see. So the Gemara, Shal Rab Shimon ben Lakish is Rabbi Yechanan. Rab Shimon ben Lakish asked Rabbi Yechanan the following braisa that was taught. Zu sheshanuya b'mishnah's bar kapara. There's a mishnah or a braisa that bar kapara taught, and that he taught the following halacha. Harei shehaya eichel sadeh. A person is occupying a property, is eating the produce in a property. Uba b'chaskas shaloi, and he has the presumption, he has the chazaki, he's there, he's occupying it, and it's his. Now v'kara olav echadir, and someone came and challenged his ownership. Loi mar shali. Person comes and says, no, this property that you're possessing is mine. Now, the one that's occupying the property takes out a document of a sale, that whether it says you sold it to me, or that you gave it to me as a gift. So now, if the one that challenges comes and says, this shtar, I never wrote the shtar, the whole thing is a forgery. So then you're going to have to verify the shtar. This is the point that we mentioned in the beginning of the whole sugi here, that when it comes to any shtar, it's valid, but midrabanan, if there's a challenge to the authenticity of the shtar, you're going to have to validate the shtar with the ones that signed it. Now, if the one that's challenging here comes and says that the shtar was written, it's a valid shtar, but it was no sale. Why? Because shtar pasim huzeh. This is a shtar that I wrote just to appease you, because you were nudging me that I should sell you this property, or that I should give you a document that you bought this property. So I appeased you and I gave you this document that said that you bought this property. Maybe this person wanted to just have a document to show people that he owns property so he can do business, real estate, but I never sold it to you. It was just an appeasement. Or shtar amana. That it was just a shtar that I sold it to you. It was a shtar that was written on a trust, meaning that I was planning on selling it to you, and I wrote you the shtar in advance that I would sell it to you, but it was never really sold yet. But you never paid for me this yet, so it really was not sold yet. That's his challenge. So he's agreeing that it's a good shtar, but he's challenging the use of the shtar because he's saying it's possible because I never actually sold you. So now what do we say in such a case? So over here, this is the same discussion that we were talking about before. The shtar now has been validated. It's not been validated by an independent source. It's been validated by the giver of the shtar itself, by the one that wrote the shtar, by the seller. Now, he's validating it, and at the same time, he also wants to passel it. So here comes up the same machlokes that we had before. Do I say pesha asa hua pesha hitir? If he's the one that's validating, he can argue that it's a valid shtar, but there was no sale here. Or no, once he validated it, so now this shtar is like a edus, it's kosher, minatayra, and he can't come and invalidate it. So what does it say here in this braisa? What did Bar Kapara say? Im yesh edim. If you have Edim, if this one that's challenging the ownership is going to be able to bring Edim for this, that it wasn't a real sale, then you'll follow those Edim. But Vimlav, if he can't bring Edim to back up his claim when he wants to passel the shtar, so then Halech achar shtar. We just follow what the shtar says, meaning once the shtar is validated, ain't tzarich l'kaima. He admitted that the shtar is kosher, so you don't need any other independent source to validate it. He cannot come and argue these kind of arguments that he can't come and argue that and say that it was a shtar amana, because once he validated it, the shtar is totally mekoyim. This is what the Bar Kapara taught in the Braisa. Now says the Gemara, based on what we learned before, Leimer Rab Meiri. So shall we say that what it says here? So Reish Lakish is asking Rab Yechanan, is this? So this Braisa that the Bar Kapara taught is Rab Meir's opinion. The Amma, as we quoted before, Rab Meir is the one that said, that whenever the person himself, whether it's the loive or the giver of the shtar, he admitted that the shtar is valid, and it's tzarich l'kaima. There's no additional validation needed from an independent source. You can't challenge the authenticity of the shtar. And v'loi Rabbanan, it's not according to the opinion of the Rabbanan that say that if it's you that validated it, you could at the same time invalidate it. You apesh also apesh hitter. So it seems like that Bar Kapara is teaching his Braisa not according to the majority opinion. So Amalei Rabbi Yechanan answered, "Loi, no, that's not the case. Shani Aimer, I say actually that Divrei Hakoil, that everybody would agree, that once a shtar is validated, then and that's in other words, it's validated just by the giver himself or by the seller himself. That's a full validation. No additional kiyum is necessary, and he cannot come and passel the shtar." So the Gemara asks on this, how did Rabbi Yechanan answer this? How did Rabbi Yechanan say that everybody agrees to this? Didn't we quote before, the Vaham Miflik Pligi? There's an argument about this. And first the Gemara brings regarding our Mishnah, when there's the case of a shtar, and now there's an argument that the giver of the shtar is saying, it was a shchiv mirah. So what did it say in our Mishnah? First the Gemara brings here the Tanya. It's supposed to be the Tanya. First the Gemara brings the Braisa of Masechta Ksubis, where you had a loan, and the person admits that the shtar was written, but he says, you can't use the shtar because I was a child when the shtar was written, or because I was Amoneh, or it was Anusim, or the Edom come and say that over there, that Braisa is actually talking about Edom. The Edom come and say that we were Ketanim when we signed the shtar, or we were anusim when we signed the shtar. So what did it say over there? That it's a machlaikis. It's not lekula alma. It said ein amana lepaisloi. Rab Meir. Rab Meir says because the loiva admitted that the shtar is written, so therefore now the Edom cannot invalidate it. But the chachamim oimrim namanim. The chachamim say that even after the loiva admits that the shtar was written, if the Edom come and say that we were ketanim when we signed it, that we were anusim when we signed it, they could invalidate it. So we see that chachamim say you will need an independent source to validate the shtar. So it is a machlekes. How's Rabbi Yechanan saying lekula alma that it's already fully validated? Amalei, so Rabbi Yechanan responds to the Shlakish and says that you can't compare. And here the Gemara brings back the svara that it said in Omer Aleph. Over there it's talking about Edom. Edom alimi, if you find there that the Chachamim hold that the Edom can come and invalidate the shtar, that the loiva admitted to that it's kosher. So Edom are stronger. Umari shtar, they're able to come and weaken this and break this shtar. But Ihu, if it's just the seller of the shtar himself, Kol Kamine, the seller of the shtar himself, if he admits that this shtar is kosher, he can't come and say a story about this. He can't come and say shtar aman and shtar pasim. So this Braisa of Bar Kapara was talking about when it's the seller himself that came to challenge the shtar. So he can't challenge the shtar. That's the difference. So therefore, that's what Rabbi Yechanan said, that in this case, where it's the seller himself, everybody would agree that once he admitted that the shtar is kosher, he cannot challenge this. Amalei, so the Gemara presses on this matter further and says, but in your name, Resh Lakish is asking Rabbi Yechanan, in your name it was said, regarding the story that was brought up before, where it's also only not Edom that are challenging the validity of the shtar, when it's just the people themselves, whether the giver of the shtar, whether the seller, when they are challenging, you yourself said that you are able to challenge it. Because in your name it was said, regarding the story you brought before, by the person that sold, and then the family members. They're the ones that coming and are challenging and saying that the one that sold was a cotton. And what did Rabbi Yechanan say about that? That the family members they were right when they challenged the star, even though they admitted to the star. But what was their challenge? That the one that wrote the star, when he sold it, was a cotton. So what do we see over here? That Rabbi Yochanan himself holds that it's not just Edom that could come and invalidate the star and challenge it. Even just the family members, they are not Edom. They're able to come and challenge the star. So how could Rabbi Yochanan now say that everybody agrees that once he admits that the star is valid, the seller admits that the star is valid, you can't now come and passel it? Amalei, so Rabbi Yochanan tells Rish Lakish, I didn't say this. Zu Alaza Omra. My student Rabbi Alaza said that. Ani lo amarti dava zeh mi'olam. But that's something that I never said. My opinion still stands that if the seller agrees that the star is kosher, he cannot himself come now and invalidate the star. But the Gemara now brings another source where Rabbi Yochanan spoke about this. Rabbi Zera said, if Rabbi Yochanan could deny what was said, and he could say that it's only his student that said it, and he disagrees with this, but Rabbi Yanai, would he deny what he himself said in front of his teacher Rabbi Yanai? Because we know that he himself said in front of his teacher as follows. Rabbi Yanai said, Rebbe said, if the giver or the seller or the borrower, he himself admits that this shtar is valid, tzarich l'kaimai, it still is going to have to be validated. He himself could still challenge the authenticity of the shtar. Or there's another gear here, ain't it tzarich l'kaimai. Now, v'amalei Rabbi Yochanan, on this Rabbi Yochanan said, Rabbi Yanai, which was one of his teachers, he said to Rabbi Yanai, Loi mishnaseinu hizu. This that you're saying now, whether he himself could now come and challenge the authenticity of this shtar, isn't this the argument in our Mishnah that we spoke about over here regarding the shtar that was written? And now the person is coming to challenge and say that I was a shchiv mira, I was a dying person when I wrote this. The chachamim b'yimrin, what did the chachamim say? Hamaitz mechaveirei olav arayah. That amaitz mechaveirei olav arayah, and what does that mean? Ein raya ela b'kiyum shtar. That you're going to have to validate the shtar independently, even though the giver of the shtar admitted that the shtar is written kosher, but if he has the ability to challenge and say it's a kosher shtar, but it was a shchiv mira, and therefore you're going to have to validate the shtar independently. So that's what he's saying. The chachamim hold. So how could Rabbi Yochanan say that a person that admits to a shtar that it's written and it's valid, that he himself cannot invalidate the shtar? Edom could, but the person himself can't. So here Rabbi Yochanan himself told Rabbi Yanai and said that in our Mishnah, the pshat in our Mishnah is that he himself has to validate, that when he admits, he can then say that he was a shchiv mira, and we're going to have to independently verify it. So we see that he could challenge the authenticity of the shtar. So the Gemara says on this, so even though now we see that Rabbi Yochanan himself holds this, but Beram, nevertheless, Nirin Divrei Rabbeinu Yosef, it appears that what Rabbi Yosef said is true. The Amar Rabbeinu Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, that Zu Divrei Chachamim, that this is the opinion of the Chachamim. Avol Rab Meir says, Meide b'shtar shekasvai tzarech l'kaimai. Rab Meir is the one that says that if he himself admitted that the shtar is kosher, it's not going to be enough. You have to independently verify it. And so here, if you notice, the Gemara now is switching the opinions. The Gemara now is switching that it's the Chachamim. The Chachamim are the ones that say that once you admit to a shtar, so then you don't need any independent source to verify it and you can't challenge it. It's Rab Meir, the one that says that you're going to have to independently verify it. So therefore he says, what did Rabbi Yochanan mean when Rabbi Yochanan was explaining before the Braisa of Bar Kapare, Umay Divrei HaKoil, when Rabbi Yochanan said that everybody would agree that once you admit to a shtar, you cannot challenge it, the Rabbanon, he's saying this, Rabbanon legabe Rab Meir. It's because it's Rabbanon that are arguing against Rab Meir, so therefore that's what's called Divrei HaKoil, that we follow the opinion of the Rabbanon. So Divrei HaKoil, therefore he's calling this Divrei HaKoil, even though Rab Meir argues, but because the Chachamim are the majority opinion, so therefore we're following the opinion of the Chachamim. Okay, but now the Gemara is going to address that what just happened over here in the Gemara is we just switched all the opinions. Until now we were saying that it's the Chachamim that are ones that say that if you admit to a shtar, you can still challenge that. Now we're saying, no, it's Rab Meir the one that says that. Chachamim are the ones that hold that if you admit to a shtar, then it's done. You can't challenge it anymore. So the Gemara asks right away in this, in our Mishnah it says the exact opposite. That it's the Chachamim the ones that said, that even though you have a document, but you're still going to have to bring an additional proof. You still have to bring an additional proof because it's not enough that you admit it, because you could still challenge it and say you were a shchiv mira. Says the Gemara, Eipach. You're going to have to switch the opinions in the Mishnah here in order that it should fit with what Rabbi Yochanan said, that it's the Chachamim that say that once you validate the shtar, you cannot challenge it anymore. Now the Gemara goes back to the Braisa that we brought before from Ksubis. V'atanya, In the Braisa we learned that Adam cannot invalidate a star. Once the Leiva admitted that it's kosher, it's Rav Meir the ones that says that. The Chachamim say that they are believed. So again, regarding this, the Chachamim say Eipach. So the Gemara here says Eipach, that we have to switch the opinions, that it should fit with what Rabbi Yechanan says now, that you validate the star. And once you validate the star, according to the Chachamim, you cannot challenge this anymore. It's Rav Meir the one that says you're going to need an additional validation. Now the Gemara goes back. I'm going to finish this Inyan. I'm going to go. It's one continuation here. Let's just finish this Inyan. So the Gemara asks in this, V'harab Yechanan. Now there's another question here that comes out from all of this, because now we see here that how did Rabbi Yechanan explain the pshat in our Mishnah? When the Mishnah was discussing the case of the Shchiv Mirah, the way Rabbi Yechanan explained this is that what's the raya that it said in our Mishnah? When the Chachamim say you have to bring a raya, the raya is to validate the star. That's it. You don't have to bring Eidim that were there that know whether he was healthy or not. But that's not what Rabbi Yechanan said before. Before, on Amar Aleph, when the Gemara quoted the Machlokes of Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish, it said that Rabbi Yechanan says it's not enough to validate the star in our case. Because there's a line missing in the star, as the Gemara explained before, you're going to have to bring Eidim that are going to verify that were there, that know what happened. Now we're saying that it's Rabbi Yechanan that it's explaining the pshat in our Mishnah, that it's just enough to bring a raya to validate the star, but you don't need any Eidim. So again, the Gemara says in this as well, Eipach. So we're going to switch the opinions as well. It's Rabbi Yechanan the one that says that it's enough to validate the star. It's Reish Lakish the one that says that you have to bring Eidim. It's not just enough to verify the star. You're going to have to bring Eidim that were there to know that he was not a Shchiv Mirah. So based on this, the Gemara says, if so, Leima Leipach Nami Tuyufte. So if so, we have to also switch the names of the question that was asked before. The Gemara before brought the question from the case of the family member that sold, and after he passed away, there was a question whether he was a cotton or not. And over there, from that Braise, it was mashma that you need Eidim for this. And Rabbi Yechanan, before we brought that, it's Rabbi Yechanan that was proving his opinion, but now that we switched the names, Reish Lakish is the one that says that you need Eidim, so then it would seem that you would have to change the one that asked the question there as well from that Braise. So the Gemara says, Loi, you don't have to switch the names regarding that Braise. Why? Because the way we understand the question there is different. Hachi ka'amalei Rabbi Yechanan Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. We can still say that it's Rabbi Yechanan that was asking the question from Reish Lakish, even though we just switched the opinions. Rabbi Yechanan is now the one that says that it's enough to validate the star. You don't need any Eidim. But Rabbi Yechanan is still asking on Reish Lakish in that case. Again, what was the story in that case? The Gemara here now is understanding the story in that case the way the Gemara concluded before, and that is that the buyers in that case already occupied the property. They took away the property from the family, and now the family wants to take it back. So now what was the question Rabbi Yechanan asked about this? According to me, it's understood that I said that it's enough to validate a star, and we don't have to bring Eidim that were there that know that it was not a cotton when he sold it. Once you validate the star, that's good enough. The Mishkachas law. That's why it's telling us a story. The Nachsil Lekuches Lenachasim. That's why the buyers were able to take the properties away from the family. How were they able to take away these properties in the first place? With a star. How did they take it away with a star? Because once you validate the star, that's good enough. We're not chayshish that he was a cotton. That's how they got it. But you, Reish Lakish, say, as the Gemara switched now the opinions, and the Gemara says, Reish Lakish says that you have to have actual Eidim that know that he was not a Shchiv Mirah, and in this case that he was not a Katan. So how does this story play out? How did the buyers in the first place go and take away the property of the family? And on this, Amalei, Reish Lakish answers to this question, and this is the svara I brought up before, that in this case, Medinalach Ba'ara de B'nei Mishpacha, that over here, in this case, I would agree, the challenge of the family is an invalid challenge. Why? The Lav Arahu. This is not a valid challenge at all. Because my Kalmi, what is their challenge in the story of the sale here? Cotton Hoya. They're saying that the family member that sold the properties, he was a child, and therefore there was no sale here. But that's not a good challenge, because for this we have a very strong chazakeh. Chazakeh, eino edim chayspim al ashtar. We have a chazakeh that witnesses will not sign a document, elam kenasa gadol, unless he was an adult. Otherwise, edim would not sign the shtar, and therefore when they presented the shtar, in this case, we don't need any additional proof of edim. We know that he was definitely a gadol when the shtar was written.
Wasn't